right, let's do a little tour through my sketchbooks. And I made a confession on my blog a few weeks ago that this is the first sketchbook that I completely filled in all of my years of having sketchbooks. And I have filled journals, but not sketchbooks, because I always feel like they're not tidy enough. They're not good enough. I don't want to have evidence of like horrible drawings. So I start to fill a sketchbook and then I just want to use a different paper. I'm not happy with the sketches in it. So I tend to then move on to something new. But I'm learning the satisfaction of filling an entire sketchbook, and I'm committed to keep doing it. This is a Pentalic Sketchbook, and I really like their paper. I customized it with my own ribbon marker, but it has good paper. I like it. I have started putting my name, date, and location in the front of my sketchbooks because of some antique sketchbooks that I bought. And I really appreciate that they put their name and where they were and the dates in it for the future. I started this sketchbook doing a domestica class with my son, Calvin, and he wanted to do some illustration work. So we took a class together. So we wrote out our influences and the materials we were going to use. And the first assignment was drawing our art supplies, which I loved because I love art supplies. So drawing them has become one of my favorite things and a little go-to when I'm not quite sure what to sketch. So I drew some of my fountain pens, a feather quill that I have. Then we moved on to utensils and things that were just sitting out on the kitchen table. So these were salt shakers. And this is an example of where I had to push past drawing something that was like, it was not proportioned right. I felt like it was ugly. So I just had to get on with it and draw another one. And I'm really trying not to make notes about how bad my art is. So now we took the art supplies and made them a bit more fun by adding like little wings to them and stuff. My son was so much better at this than I was. I just sort of drew my supplies, but I had a good time doing that. This is a piece I did with a ruling pen and some sepia ink. Drawing more supplies, a parallel ruler, bamboo dip pen, a little bone ink scraper. I really love my art supplies, and some more art supplies. I was trying out different inks and also different pens. You can see like this pen is a lot thicker than this one. This is a vintage fountain pen that I bought in Paris, and I was using a Waterman ink that's water soluble, and it's a little bit more of a gray color than a black. And I drew a pump inkwell that I have. And then I started getting a little bit more adventurous. So this is based on a picture I took in Paris in 2018. Architecture has always really scared me because of all of the lines and angles, perspective, the details, but I'm really pushing into that. This is a little crepe shop that I photographed as well. And this is, I think that might be a corner. I don't know. I was going to say of the Louvre, but I don't think it is. Anyway, it's a picture that I took in Paris as well. I think that was from the river. We were on a boat. And this is in Paris also. I think this is in the Monet district. And this was in Reims, France. Some more architecture. Shakespeare and Company. I did buy a couple of books there, which was one of my, like, on my to-do list when we were in Paris. And I started adding people. Like, I don't want it to look like it's the apocalypse. So let's add some people. It's okay if they're not perfect. They'll get better. His head's a little big. That's all right. This is in Barga, Italy. This is this wonderful little hardware store. They would always have these amazing baskets sitting out front and hanging out front. So I drew that. This is in Florence. That's the hotel we stayed in. It's the Piazza Pitti Palace, and that was our room where the balcony is. I was playing around with some walnut ink here, and this is the gate of St. John's Hospital in England. This is from a picture, and it's also based on antique sketchbooks that I found or that I purchased earlier this year. And I've been doing studies, which you'll see, of some of his sketches. He was an architect, so his architectural sketches are amazing. My perspective on this one is off, but I really enjoyed playing around with the walnut ink. Here I drew my walnut ink and a solvent box, a little palette knife, a vintage palette knife that I got. Here's some more walnut ink, playing around with it. I kind of like how that turned out. You know, really, it's a lot like watercolor. You mix water with it to make it a bit more transparent, or you can use it with a dip pen. So I played with that a little bit more here, and I felt like this one was a little bit more successful. Here's a watercolor when I was at the beach at Isle of Palms, South Carolina. The beach was like beach, ocean, sky with no clouds. It was like stripes. So trying to draw that was not going to be very interesting. So I ended up painting some of the beach houses. Here was the beach. I got some of the umbrellas in there, and then a woman who was sitting reading a book. I loved her sun hat. And that was it. And when I got to the last page, I'm like, oh, I did it. I filled the whole book. And this book is an Arteza book. I love the covers. They have kind of a linenish cover. We're revisiting some architecture here. This was a door in Italy. And actually, I drew this one in graphite and then added the watercolor later. This is in Barga. That's the old Roman wall and the front gate that was around Barga. It's a great little town in Tuscany. This is one of the studies of a sketch by Herbert Kitchen. I bought 4 of his sketchbooks and have since started studying his family and making studies from his sketchbooks. I'll have to give you a little tour of those in a video. This is Paris. We were sitting at a little bistro table, and this was our view of Notre Dame. This is another study from the kitchen sketchbooks. And another one. This is actually the other side of this house. I love the roof line of this house. Really enjoyed drawing it. These are some sketches I did in the car on our way to the beach. And that was also from the car. That was a great exercise because I had to just be really quick and kind of keep it in my memory. This was one of my beach paintings. There were a couple sailboats out on the horizon, and it was pretty basic because, again, there wasn't much going on. There weren't clouds or anything else. This is a pencil sketch of the beach. These are some pen and ink sketches from Guptill's book, pen and ink book. I'll have to review that. It's a wonderful, absolutely wonderful pen and ink book. I learned so much, and I loved doing these little studies. This is a bike that I saw in Florence, Italy, just leaning up against the wall with some little crates in it. It's really sweet. Took a picture of that. And then this is an urn on one side of my door with some little pansies in it. And this is another study from Guptill's book. This is a carriage house in Charleston, South Carolina. I drew this from a picture I took while I was there. And it was a challenge. There's a lot of detail. This is a blind contour I did of an oyster shell, just kind of to relax and have fun. I did this sketch, so we had church outside, and I did this sketch while we were outside. I was sketching during a sermon, I admit it. But I was really working on drawing the shadows behind the trees and not just drawing the trees. This is another church sketch. There's a farm off of the amphitheater where we were having church, and I drew that. And then this is from a book. It's from Guptill's book on rendering in pencil, and I did a little study. I loved the cows grazing. This is a study of a Sicily painting. And this is some more church sketches. I was drawing like a little bush. This was the pattern that was on my dress and some clovers that were at my feet. This is another kitchen sketch study. His are all in graphite and some watercolor, and I did mine in pen and ink. These are just some more studies these are studies from Guptill's pen and ink book, Rendering in Pen and Ink. And I'll link that below because it's a fantastic book. These are both off of pictures, a little dove house, and then this is a picture of a barn that I took a picture of on the way to North Carolina. This is just practicing some pen and ink exercises, just some mark making and patterns. Same thing, working on value studies in pen and ink, and back to drawing some art supplies. This is a chair in our family room. I'm working on drawing more from life. These are kind of fun. These are some sketches, some Turner study sketches in watercolor. His watercolor sketches in his sketchbook are so manic, but I found them really fun, a great way to like just loosen up. And this is just an imaginary landscape I did, just playing around with watercolors. This is my favorite fountain pen, the one I bought in Paris, and I painted that. A little gesture sketch of my dog, Sebastian, which I made notes. He's tough to sketch because he moves a lot and he's almost all black. So he's just like one black blob when I try to draw him. So I was just trying to capture his lines, work on that. This is just a little watercolor study. It's loosely based on someone I follow on Instagram, Erin Spencer. She was doing some watercolors and I loved kind of the browns she put in her clouds, and I was just trying to play with that look a little bit. I'll link to her as well. And here's just a watercolor study sort of going off of that study and adding some browns to the clouds, using cerulean blue for the sky. Here's a blind contour of my watercolor box, and I decided to go back and actually add in the watercolors, which was fun. It got a little messy because the ink is water soluble, but I still like how it turned out. This is a watercolor study of a Monet painting, which was a challenge. And this is just a watercolor landscape that I did and added a little bit of gouache to the clouds. Back to drawing art supplies, my cup and my favorite watercolor brush. This is off of another picture from Paris. There was a market out there and we had missed it. They were cleaning up, but I loved seeing just things kind of stacked up on the stalls, and there were even some chairs up on a wagon. It was just kind of a cool thing to take some pictures of. This is a little sketch based off of some pictures of pressed flowers that I drew. And that's it. So I've filled 2 sketchbooks since April. It's July now. And I'm already working on my 3rd. So I will share that sketchbook tour when that's done.